Jay Shear.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear,
business consultant.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear Business Consulting.
Welcome. I'm Jay Shear with Jay Shear Business Consulting. We build solid foundations for service-based businesses to grow and scale and achieve the results and success they deserve. And you've joined Business Minds Coffee Chat. Napoleon Hill said, every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. Well, on today's episode, we talk about overcoming adversity, breaking generational curses, mindset, the growth trap, being a disruptor, and more. Our guest is a successful serial entrepreneur, a nationally recognized real estate and mortgage leader, speaker, branding expert, mentor, and podcaster. An entrepreneur at heart, he builds businesses and advises individuals to create wealth through real estate, personal branding, and their own business ventures. He's been featured in International Business Times, Yahoo News, California Herald, Market Watch, and many other media outlets. Please welcome the president of Home Qualified and the man behind the Disruptors Network, Ralph DiBugnara. Ralph, it is so good to see you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Jay. That was an awesome intro. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure, and I am super excited about this conversation. So let's dive in, because there's a lot of ground that I know we're going to cover here, and I know there's going to be so much value that comes out of this conversation for our listeners. So, you know, like many things, we have to start from the beginning to better understand where we are today in life and also where we're planning to go. So why don't we wind the clock back a bit, and could you share with us a bit about your origin story, where you came from? And I know that there is a lot to that story, and we'll try to unpack that a bit, but let's go back a bit. Give us some context around your backstory.
Sure. So I'm a New Yorker my whole life. I actually live in New Jersey now, so it's a little bit weird. But I grew up in New York City, in Brooklyn. I was born in Brooklyn, and two really working class parents. My father was an educator, so was my mom. My father was a teacher and then a principal and then a professor. Now, still in his 70s, he's still a professor. And, you know, we grew up in a two-family home in Brooklyn, a very, very traditional Italian kind of upbringing during that time. And I was in a pretty much mostly Italian neighborhood growing up. It was a great community. It was really, really good for me growing up there, and maybe too much of a cocoon, because later on in life, when I had to go other places, it became a little bit harder. But New York is kind of a mixed bag where it's, you know, just from neighborhood to neighborhood, you meet different cultures. So I think we're kind of grown in our culture, but there's always other culture around you. So, you know, I lived in Brooklyn most of my life, and then I eventually moved to Manhattan when I started working in New York City. And I was there probably for about 15 years in Manhattan, first downtown and then uptown and kind of all over the city. But this has always been my home. And even though I don't like the cold anymore, this will always be a special place for me.
Very interesting. So let's go back for a bit, because I'd love to better understand a bit about your youth, and what were some of the lessons that you learned from both your mother and father? You know, as you think back, what were some of those lessons, and how did they impact you? And at the time, did you recognize them as lessons, and have they stayed with you today?
So I don't think I recognized it at the time. I think now more than ever, as I had children, my children are 8 and 6 now, you start to reflect on a lot of stuff that happened throughout your youth, and you start to almost realize a lot more about yourself. So through a lot of soul searching over the last few years, my dad is, my mom is a very, very loving, and I can't do anything wrong in her eyes, and she loves everything I do. My dad is really the strong, silent type. And even though he was an educator, he didn't even stress education in our household. His method, and I realize this today, his method was always really, he wanted us to learn and do things on our own. And, you know, if we had questions, he would answer them, but he was really looking for us to find our own way. And I didn't understand that at the time, and I understand it now later on in life, and it really served me well. I actually had this conversation with my own son last weekend because we were leaving one of his basketball games, and he didn't have a great game, and he just seemed disinterested. And I said to him, I said, "Hey, you know who came to all my basketball games, my practices when I was little?" And he said, "Who?" I said, "Nobody." I said, "My dad was working." I said, "He dropped me off, and I had to figure it out on my own." I was like, I think a little bit. Trying to figure out how to parent on my own, I'm trying to figure out what's the line there, right? Like, how much do I show up at? I want to be at everything, and then how much do I let them learn on my own? So I think from that, I had some rough times as a youth because I didn't understand it. So when I was about 14 years old, my parents moved me from Brooklyn to Staten Island, which is only about 2 miles away from each other. It's two boroughs in New York, but it's like living across the country. Like, that's how much of a difference it is. And I was a shy child, really. And in my neighborhood in Brooklyn, I was a shining star. I was great at basketball. I was great at baseball. I was a good athlete. I was prom king in junior high school. Like, everybody loved me. But when I was forced into this new environment where nobody knew me and nobody cared, I didn't know how to deal with it. So I think for the first year, I just sat in the house. I quit baseball. I quit basketball. I quit doing everything because, and this is something I talk about in a book I have coming up, Growth Trap, is that I got caught in this trap, right? Like, I was not naturally growing anymore, and I didn't know how to force myself to grow. And that was like the first time where I really faced adversity, and I think that lasted me almost through all of high school and college, where I never really got my confidence back. I think when I really truly got my confidence back is when I started working. Even high school was a struggle for me, and college was a struggle for me, and I got kind of around the wrong people doing the wrong things, because I believed that I felt like an outcast, and I felt like if I'm going to be an outcast, I'm going to act like one. So I started acting that way, and things that I'm not proud of, and things that probably looking back now I would never do again. But at the time, it felt like the right thing to try to make myself tougher, or make myself feel better, or make myself So I went through that whole phase until about 21 to 22 years old, when I started, working in mortgages. And I only really got into mortgages by accident. I graduated college just because I had to, not because I wanted to. I never even went back to get my diploma. Like, I literally, the last day of classes, I left and I didn't come back. And a friend got me into mortgages because there was it was 2001, the internet bubble had just burst, and there was no jobs. And he's like, "Hey, I'm doing mortgages. Rates are low. It's a great time to be in. Why don't you come try this?" And to this day, he's probably the only person that believed in me, and he gave me an opportunity, and I made it work.
Well, I want to break right there for just a moment, and I want to continue this storyline, but there's something that you said that I want to pull on that thread for a moment. Okay. And you just mentioned it again, and that was about someone believing in you, right? So let's go back when your parents made the move, and now you're in a new area that was only 2 miles away, right? But you're basically starting over again. You were a shining star where you were, and now you don't know anyone, and you're starting over again. And obviously that was a challenging time for you, as you stated. What, if you had to describe yourself at that time, after the move is made and you're in your room, how would you describe yourself? What was your mindset then?
I think I was just very, very mentally weak. When things got hard, I quit. When things weren't going to my liking, I quit. I'll go do something else. I don't want to do this. I'd always find a reason to just not do it anymore. I remember going to a baseball. They signed me up for baseball in my new neighborhood, right? And I went to the first practice, and I didn't know anybody. And I forget what had happened. It got rained out or whatever it was, but I just was so uncomfortable just being there that when it came time to go again, I was like, I'm not going. I quit. I don't want to play baseball anymore. So I just think when anything got tough, instead of saying, let me try this and try to figure it out, which is probably what my father was trying to get me to do, right? My response was, that's it, I quit. I'll go do something else. And that really followed me through almost everything. Unless you challenged me physically, or you tried to intimidate me, or you tried to bully me, I never really rose up, right? If you tried to do that, for some reason, that was always in me, that I would rise up in those situations. But in normal circumstances, I would just quit. I was comfortable being the kid in the corner that nobody looked at, and I just would quit everything else.
All right. So that's something that you were telling yourself. That was a storyline that you were playing over and over again at that point. So what became what was the spark, the catalyst? What was it that made you realize that I'm not the quitter, right? You reframed it somehow. How did that happen? When did it happen? Why did it happen?
It's so funny because I think back on this now. When I was getting around the age of graduating college, I actually remember, and I've been through some stressful things in my life, but I actually remember that being almost the most stressful part of my life because I knew I had something inside me that I knew I was better than I was allowing myself to be, right? I had this feeling inside of me. And I think at some point, I got so sick of being mediocre and a failure and all that stuff. Like I just got sick of it, right? I got tired of it. Like I don't want to be this person anymore. So what am I going to do about it? Well, I guess I'm going to go try something new. And the job I finally took when I took the job in mortgages was a commission job. It was no money. So I had saved up. I made a plan. If somebody put something in front of me and gave me a goal at that time, I could make a plan around it. So I made a plan. I was like, I'm going to save up enough money to last me like 3 or 4 months because I know I'm not going to get a paycheck. And that's what I did. So I really had enough reserves to get me through a few months. So I had a deadline on this project, right? So, and what I say to everybody all the time, and when I talk about the growth trap, I was somebody forced my back against the wall because now there's no more school, there's no more excuses. What are you going to do with your life? Like, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And I forced my back against the wall because I had to figure something out. I didn't want to be I really didn't want to be a failure, so I had to figure something out. So my back was forced against the wall. This is why I think we have to naturally force our own backs against the wall because somebody else does it for me. Because that was me being pushed into a corner, and I just decided to fight back at that point. But I made a plan, and the plan worked. And I think once one plan worked for me, then I had some more confidence inside of me. Like, oh wow, I can do a lot more through hard work than I thought, and I'm better than I thought it was. And these people like me again, and I'm good at my job. And it gave me a renewed confidence to try to start to move forward.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm hearing that, and in conversations that you and I have had in the past, that's what I pulled out of that conversation was the fact that, and you've articulated this very well, that when you're put in that corner, right, when you're challenged, that's when you shine. And knowing that you could shine and that you could move forward and accomplish whatever you wanted to and reach, incredible levels of success, you didn't need to be backed in the corner. That's just what you were telling yourself at the time.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So I want to go back to the quote that I mentioned at the beginning as we were kicking this off, the quote by Napoleon Hill, where, every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. Do you buy into that quote?
1,000,000%. Yeah, 1,000,000%. I think that my failures are never really, and there's a lot of them, but they're never really failures. I really look at them as just stepping stones to the next success, right? And two things. I think that I almost embrace failure at this point now because I was like, all right, I'm on to something, right? Like I tried something, I failed, but I'll do it better the next time. And it happened this morning. I'm doing a team race with a group this morning, and it's a virtual thing. And we had to run 3 miles. We had to run 1 mile each. And I went out and I ran a certain time, and I looked at the time afterwards. I was like, wow, I didn't go 100%. Like, I know I can do better than this. But like the time I got, I looked at it as a failure, but I'm embracing that now. It's like, I could do so much better next time, right? So I think continuously in life, I look at my failures as just stepping stones to what the next accomplishment is. And for me, unfortunately, it almost makes the accomplishments not as big of a deal because I'm always looking for the next thing. Like, I tend not to celebrate accomplishments. And it's not because they don't mean anything to me. It's just because I look at everything as a stepping stone. So the failure is a stepping stone, and so are the accomplishments. The accomplishments are just another stepping stone to something bigger that's going to come next. So I don't tend to celebrate accomplishments no matter what happens. And I think if I could just talk to my younger self, that's what I would tell them. It's like, go out and fail more. This is the time you really want to fail, right? Like, this is the time, go 100 miles an hour, like run into the wall, do whatever you got to do. This is when you really want to fail. And, if I have any regrets about that time is that I didn't fail more. I just protected myself from the failure.
So I want to make sure that we are accentuating that point right there, because that's a powerful one, right? So for everyone that's watching and listening to this right now, man, heed those words. Because if we, that's one thing that we can't do is we can't change what happened in the past, but we can absolutely learn from it and take that experience and move forward. And that's the power of having mentors around us, right? So look at this conversation with Ralph right now as a conversation with a mentor who's sharing an incredibly important lesson with you. So keep going. Thank you, Ralph.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's the biggest thing. I think I've talked about some other things, and I've hit this a few times in my life. At rock bottom, I always look at it as a gift, and I've hit a few rock bottoms, and I always feel like it's a gift because they're the biggest learning lessons, right? Like failure is one thing. You hit a bottom, there's a ton of good stuff in there, right? But you got to use it the right way. If you use it the wrong way, those are the people that are always talking about, I was great then, I did this then, I accomplished this then, but what did you learn from that to kind of because you could be better than that still. So, that's what I really look to today for more than anything.
I love that mindset. I really do. I'm curious though, with you leading a large team, and where you mentioned that you look at each accomplishment really as a milestone, and that you weren't celebrating them. How do you handle that from a team building standpoint? So when your team wins, when your team accomplishes something, whether it's a race, whether it's sales goals, whatever that happens to be, are you celebrating those wins in the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I've become better at acknowledging them for other people because that's a problem as a leader. That's growth as a leader. I have to acknowledge other people getting to places that they didn't think they could get to, but I also want them to know when they get there that there's so much more left in the tank. Like, this is great. You had a great month. You closed this many deals. You bought two, whatever you did. There's so much more you can do with it. And I think that I'm excited about what more, for my purposes, just internally, when I see somebody accomplish something, it makes me excited about how much more they can do. Right. So, but I have to be conscious of not being disappointed when they don't do it exactly the way I think I can do it either, or I think they should do it. So that's just growth as a leader, and I'm still evolving. I'm definitely not perfect at it by any means. Like, it's something I'm working on still every single day.
So this is an interesting one, because I'm sure this is something that many of us experience in our own lives and in our businesses. So when you have that situation where your team or a team member, let's say, doesn't hit a particular goal, kind of walk us through what that conversation looks like. Because to me, I mean, the engagements that we've had, man, you are just, you're a source of energy. You're a source of positivity, man. You are just getting after it. So kind of walk us through that conversation with someone who, let's just say, for lack of a better word, underperformed, didn't reach the goal. How do you address it?
So first of all, I let everybody know, and this is really, really important, because this is really how I feel, that when you fail, I fail. And I really feel that way. Like, if you're underperforming and something happens, that when you didn't fail on your own, we failed together. So what didn't we do this month to get you to where your goals were going to be, or this year, or whatever it is? What didn't we do? How can I help you get further, right? So I think the first thing is to let them know that you're not alone in this, that we did this together, right? We made a plan together. The plan didn't get executed. So whether you were doing it or we were doing it together, we still both failed, because I didn't hold you accountable enough to get to your goal. So it's on me as well. So I think that's the first thing to let somebody know. And then the second thing is we start to go over why they failed, what we can add on to it. And then at that point, it's like, okay, well, now, so I'm going to hold you accountable to this, this, and this, because you can't fail again. Because if you fail again, I fail, and I don't want to be there. So, and as long as there's effort, I'm fine. I don't care about failure. I have a problem when I feel a lack of effort, right? But, so as long as there's effort there, then you can fail a million times and I'll be fine with it. But I just want to make sure that there's good communication and effort. And that's the process I try to go through with them when stuff like that happens.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important. And I appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's also valuable to know that if we have a plan, and plans have to remain flexible, right? The best laid plans don't always work out. But if we have a plan that we're following, we're putting in the effort, what we don't control is the outcome, right? We do control our own actions. We control our level of accountability. But at the end of the day, what happens, happens. That's not something that we necessarily control. We try to influence to the best of our ability with all the hard work and effort and planning that we put into it. So I think that's a really powerful message that you shared. I think that's going to be a value add for our listeners for sure. So I want to go back then to where you were going with your career, right? So now you're jumping into real estate. You've got somebody that believes in you. You're on commission only at this point. You're starting to really feel the pressure to perform. So go ahead and carry that story forward a bit for us.
So I think from that point on, I worked out of fear for a long time of going backwards, and I think that in some way, shape, or form, I do that today, right? Like, backwards on income level, backwards on position in the company, backwards on whatever it is. And so at that point, I was full steam ahead for the next 7 years until the financial crisis hit. And I made a lot of mistakes along the way that I didn't necessarily know were mistakes, because for me, I was finding success financially. I was named vice president of a publicly traded company that I was working at 23. So really, really quickly, I was able to make an impact and rise really. And it was a young company. They had just gone public, and I was excelling so at that point, I never forget this. I went to my first meeting. I think I was 23 or 24, and they had assigned me this group of people to now manage, right? And I was in a room with probably 20 people, and they were all, I was the youngest person in the room by 15 years at least, right? And I didn't know any better. So, I walked into the room thinking, well, you're going to follow me because now I'm the manager. They told you I'm the manager. I didn't know at the time I had to earn their respect. And that was the first lesson I learned. And it was a hard lesson, because I think that followed me for a little while, whereas I wasn't managing effectively because I didn't know how to manage it. Nobody showed me. I was just like learning on the job, right? So, that was an interesting time period during my life, because for the next few years, I made a lot of missteps trying to manage, and I was covering up a lot of my inadequacies with production, because I was still producing at a very, very high level. So, that a lot of times bad managers are good individual producers, right? But they're not necessarily good for the group.
Another very important point. And I want you to continue the story, but I also want to find out, I want you to share with our listeners how you learned to become a better manager.
Yeah. So for the first couple of years, again, I just felt the title entitled me to the respect. And then when I realized it didn't, I got put into another position at some point, running a larger group, actually. Because again, my production, because I'm still producing at a high level, right? So that's covering up a lot of the problems and I'm a nice guy and I'm likable, but I'm not a good manager by any means. And so I got put into another position. And when I got to that position, I was like, I got to figure out something different, because in my mind, I was an imposter. Like, I knew that I wasn't doing a good job. Like, I knew that people weren't following me. I knew that people didn't trust me. I knew that I wasn't leading anybody anywhere. So what I did was I got this new job. I went and sat with every single person in my group, and I did their job for the day with them. So I think I don't know how I came up with that. It was maybe through another manager. I forget how I came up with it, but I went and sat with everybody and did their job for the day. And it gave me a better understanding of what kind of made them tick, why their job was good and or bad. And it made me more sensitive to kind of what was going on with that. And I started to do better, and the group started to do better, and I still ran into issues, but I think humbling myself again, taking myself backwards, trying to understand where these people are coming from and doing these jobs, made it a lot easier for me to understand how to lead them when I knew what their job actually was.
I love that. Again, another very powerful point and a great lesson in management and leadership, right? Understanding the shoes that someone else is walking in, right? Having empathy, realizing what their challenges are, what they're facing, building rapport, just having better understanding. Because when you can do that, right, we can open up the lines of communication. I can look for, as a leader, manager, what have you, I can look for better solutions to help them create greater success in their roles.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's 100% true. You're right. I mean, you have to understand what the functional aspects of somebody's job are before you make a judgment on it.
Absolutely. So continue the storyline.
Yeah, so I started to grow from there, and around the time where 2007 rolled around, I wouldn't say I was hitting my stride. I think that I was blind to so many things going on, and one of the things I was blind to is that as a mortgage bank, we were lending money at very, very risky levels, and I didn't know any better because I came in the business and it was like that already. When I got into the business, that was the business, and then the box kept expanding. So I just thought this was how it was. Like I didn't realize it, and I wasn't questioning it because I was making really good money, and I was just like, yeah, this works. And I was at the time, I had got my confidence back, right? So in getting my confidence back, I wanted to take the world on. So this is where my entrepreneurship journey really starts. So I was always really a music lover. So I decided when I first moved into Manhattan that I was going to go out and find a hip hop act that I could manage. I really wanted to be in that world. So I started going to showcases by myself, and I ended up finding somebody that I really liked after a few months. And I said, look, you're very good, but you're raw. I have some money. I have some business experience. I'd like to manage you. And I started a management company. So these are kind of going on parallel to each other, my mortgage business and the management business. And around 2006, 2007, they were both doing very, very well. I wasn't making money necessarily with the music business, but we were making strides. My artist had been on MTV, and he had been in all the music publications, and we had put out a single, and it had gotten a lot of radio play, and we were starting to really make some noise. Around that time, I had connected with somebody who was working at Atlantic Records at the time, which was a major record label, and I was working with him on his consulting company, and he's actually one of my best friends till this day. He's still in the business. His name is Sycamore. He's the executive vice president of Interscope Records, and he's kind of the man behind Travis Scott, who's one of the biggest artists in the world. So he's still going. But anyway, so these businesses, so I was spending a lot of money, not on the wrong things, but I didn't have any foresight. So I was buying a lot of real estate, and I was spending money on my businesses. So I wasn't spending money frivolously, I wouldn't say. I just didn't have any protection or reserve set up. So I'm kind of on this upward, track, and the market crashes in 2007, 2008. And I mean, when I tell you I lost everything within a few months, I lost everything. I went from I was living in a penthouse on Wall Street that was down the block from my office that I worked in every single day. And within 3 months, I had to move out because I couldn't afford the rent anymore. And there's a lot to that little bumpy story there. But my company, they said within 60 days, they were like, we're not doing mortgages anymore. Like, that's it. So I didn't go from making a lot of money to a little money. I went from making a lot of money to nothing. Like, it literally went to nothing. So I was telling the story recently. I got 2 job offers after they started to stop doing mortgages. They offered me a position at the company, but it was something that I didn't really believe in. And I ended up being right long-term. And they started to transition to international financing, and they wanted me to work on their projects they were working on in Dominican Republic and Mexico. The company I was working had been acquired by Deutsche Bank, which is a large German investment bank. It's still around today. And they wanted to transition me to a position, but I didn't know anything about it, and I just didn't see the upside to it. So I was like, I'm going to stay where I know where I can make money. So over the next 6 months, I took 2 jobs. I had 2 companies that closed after I took the jobs. So wow. They hired me, and then they both closed. I went from living in this apartment to a 400 square foot studio back in Staten Island. I moved back to Staten Island. And then I had all these properties that I owned, and that was a nightmare because they were free falling. They were worth like 30, 40 cents on the dollar at that time, from when I bought them, over the next 12 months. So eventually, this is funny because the gentleman I'm about to talk about is my business partner today.
Okay.
Eventually, after the second company, both of the companies that I took jobs with, they gave me a guaranteed salary, which was like air at that point. I was like, okay, great. I got some money coming in. I can keep things afloat. But it was really, it was a detriment to me, to be honest with you, now that I think back on it, because it was keeping me from forcing my back against the wall again because it was giving me air, right? Long story short, the second company starts bouncing checks on me. So I know the end is near. So I was like, I got to figure something out. There was only one mortgage company in Manhattan at that time that was offering jobs. They were offering loan officer jobs. So I was like, I'm not a loan officer anymore. I passed that 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I'm going to go into the company and I'll work it out. So I show up at this company for my interview. My friend got me an interview, and it was like a 100-person sales floor, and it was loud. Like it was like walking into like a lion's den. Like it was loud, loud, loud. So I walk in. I walk to the CEO's office, who's a guy by the name of Jim Clooney, who's actually my business partner today, which is funny. And I sat in front of him and I gave my best pitch to him on why I was a senior vice president at Deutsche Bank, and he needed me to lead his room, to be in front of this room, to lead his people, because that's what I do. And he looked at me and he said, that's great. He was like, I have a lot of senior vice presidents here. He's like, you're not a senior vice president anymore. He's like, you're a loan officer. He's like, if you want to be a loan officer, I have a job for you, and it's commission only. No guarantee, no salary, no nothing. He's like, that's the job I have for you. He's like, you can come in here and make a living and do well. We're doing business still. And they had a very, very unique proposition at the point, this company, because they were taking the loan portfolios from all these Wall Street banks that were tanking. Okay. So they were taking their loan portfolios and they were refinancing them to these Wall Street banks. They were basically saying, hey, the portfolio is worth $1 billion. Give it to us for $500 million. We'll refinance everybody, write down the mortgages, and get these people away from, get them. You're going to take a loss, but we'll get the loans off your books. So it was really, they were the only ones that were busy at that time. So I was like, I got no choice. So I took the job. And I never forget it. Jay, it was so crazy at the time. There was no jobs. So they had to pick of the litter. There was so many people out there looking for jobs. So they literally were firing people every single Friday. Every single Friday, people would disappear. Like they were cutting, and there was a big board for the sales in front of the room. So like it was very apparent. But the problem with it is that to get the leads, the better people were in the front of the room, because there was operators in the front of the room. So the better people were in the front of the room. So to get so they could see you, they're like, hey, I got a call for you. I started in the back of the room, like all the way in the back. So I'm there for like a week, and I'm like, this ain't gonna work. I can't get any leads. Like the leads are going off to all these guys up front. Like I'm screwed. I'm gonna be out of here in a couple of weeks if I don't figure this out. So again, back against the wall, I figured it out. Like challenge me, I figured it out. So what I figured out to do, now everybody was working crazy hours at this point. People were working from 9 to between 8 and 9 o'clock every single night, because people were hungry and the phones were ringing and people needed to make money. So I was like, I can't stay here later than everybody because nobody's going to call. I was like, I got to get here earlier than everybody. So I started getting there at 7 a.m. So I'd be the first one in the office. Now, there weren't a lot of leads at 7 a.m., but it didn't matter because I was the only one there. So whatever came in, I got. So, but at that point, I was really working like 13, 14-hour days because I was in at 7, but I couldn't leave before everybody else left at 8 o'clock. So I was working, but slowly but surely over like the next 60 to 90 days, I started to work my way up to the front of the room, because I started to be able to put sales up, because I was now getting leads and I was getting opportunities. And I had to teach myself to be a loan officer again, which was, it's a skill that I had, but I had to teach how to do it again. But I started to work myself up to the top of the room, and that was kind of my climb back up. But I never filed bankruptcy. I never foreclosed on any of my homes. I never short sold any of my homes. I literally, because I was too prideful, which in retrospect was pretty stupid, was too prideful to the bankruptcy or anything like that. I just dug myself out of the debt. I just literally, over time, I negotiated my balances with my credit card companies. I called the mortgage companies and I got them to modify the loans. So I dug my way out, and it was like hell for like 2 or 3 years. But I have that inside me now as a strength to always go back to. It's like, if I did that, I can do anything, because I had no resources. I didn't want to tell anybody that I had failed so badly, because I was really the first one out of my friends to ever make something of himself to that level. So I didn't want to admit that I failed. I wasn't going back to my parents, who had worked their asses off their whole lives, to tell them that I failed. So they weren't going to be any help, because I didn't want to admit to them that they were holding me up again. So I couldn't admit to them. So I just was like, this is it. I'm going to dig myself out of it. And, I did. It took me a long time, but I did.
Wow. What an extraordinary story. I was, as you were telling me this, and, I'm envisioning you, fighting and working and getting there at 7 a.m. and taking these leads and working them and converting and moving up, closer and closer to the front of this room. What did you believe about yourself at this point?
Yeah. So I think some of it was I looked at the people in the room and I was like, I know these guys aren't better than me. I've been through this before. Like, I know these people aren't better than me. I know I can compete with them. And I think the next thing was I had no choice. I just didn't want to admit that I failed. I was so scared of going backwards, and now I was forced backwards, right? I had no choice. So I was always so scared of going backwards, and now I was forced backwards by this catastrophic event that I had no control over. So when that happened, I think that I was like, I can't stay here. I'm not going to stay. You're not pushing me back to where I was when I was 19, 20 years old again. I'm not going back there again. So I got to figure it out. And a lot of people left the industry. A lot of people went and worked on different things. And I think I could have done that. And that I don't think that was a dumb move. I think that was probably a smart move for a lot of people. I think I was afraid of it. Like, I know this already. I know I can be good at this. I don't think I can be good at anything else. Let me just do this. So it ended up working out, but I probably would make some different moves with the knowledge I have today.
Yeah, I think all of us could probably say that about different points throughout our lives, right? So, I do believe that things happen for us at the right times for the right reasons. Now, we may not know it at that point, right? It's until we get perspective. It's until we're able to pull the lens back a bit to where we're able to say, oh, okay, now I get it, right? So in this particular example that you're sharing, you met your future business partner. Didn't know it at the time, right? But he enters your consciousness. So
two of them, actually. I have two business partners, and they were both there. One guy was the CEO, and the other guy was the top salesman in the company. So they ended up coming back to my life and become my business partners, but I didn't know it at the time.
All right. So that's fantastic. So let's go ahead and tie a bow around that. So how do you get from working there, right? You've got the CEO, the top salesperson, you're becoming a top salesperson as well. How did the three of you come together? How do you become business partners? What did that look like? And what was that feeling like for you?
So this is how life works in general. So it sounds like it just was a straight line up from there, right? I met these guys, we hit it off. It was not. That company closed a year later. They lost their warehouse because the mortgage industry was still not stable. So a year later, even though they were a successful company closing out loans, mortgage banks use what's called warehouse lines to fund their loans. So basically, most banks who don't hold all the paper themselves, they don't hold the mortgage themselves, will use warehousing companies that are usually lines of credit. It's like a line of credit, right, to fund their loans. And then they sweep the line, right? They take the loan, they sell the loans, they take them off the line, and they rehab it over and over again.
Okay.
So at this time in the business, the warehousing companies started to fall into a crisis. So this is around 2009, 2010. So the warehousing banks started to fall into a crisis. So this company who was successful lost all their warehousing. So over like a 90-day period, they close. So now, like, I'm in 4 closed companies within 2 years. So again, not a straight line. So the two guys that ended up becoming my business partners, I leave at that point. I didn't see them again I saw them again, but I didn't partner back up with them for another 8 years after that. So it's a long journey between that. So me and a small group of people went to a startup mortgage company. They had licenses, but they had no business. And we started over again. There was like 6 of us. And we built that out over the next 2 years to about 100 salespeople. And I would say we were probably doing somewhere around $1 billion in business at that time at this company. But these are different things that happen in your career, right? The mortgage market was like this at that point. It was not stable. So the CEO of the company, even though we had grown so much, was a very, very new CEO. And he didn't understand the ebbs and flows of mortgages at that point. So when stuff started to get tight after a couple of years, he started to fire people. He started to let people go all over the company. He started cutting expenses. And so I'm starting to look around, and there's like 4 or 5 of the executives at that point. But this is where you have to be very self-aware. I start looking around and I start realizing I was like, I don't really have, I have value here, but not the value that is going to keep me here at the top of the food chain making the money. Like, what separates me from these guys that I came over here with? Nothing. If this guy's starting to cut back on people, he's going to start cutting the bloated executives that are here because we're all making money on the business. So I start to look around, and I never forget this. I went to go talk to the CEO. One of the guys I had gone there with was in his office at the time. And I literally could hear him telling the CEO that I was expendable. He was like, Ralph manages the offices in Arizona and Pennsylvania and Florida, but we can manage those remotely. He's probably somebody who can cut back. So I'm listening to this and I'm like, I didn't even tell him I heard it. I was like, you know what? He just gave me a gift. Let me start working. So at that point, I started putting feelers out. After like a couple of weeks, I started getting stuff back. And this company in New Jersey, they were a small regional mortgage bank. They reached out to me. They said, hey, we want to meet with you. I went to meet with them. They were like, we don't have anything to give you. We're going to give you a division that you're going to start, and you got to grow from scratch, just like you grew that one, right? You just grew that one, right? Grow this one. Now, I hadn't grown that by myself, but I was like, again, I'm going to be out of there sooner than later. I better figure something out. So I started over again. This is in 2013. So in 2013, I started over again and from scratch. And I grew that division over the next 5 years from zero, me being by myself, to about 25 offices and about $400 million a year from zero. So over the next 5 years, wow. I was able to grow that. At that point, we had so now, right now, my business is my mortgage business is going to do about $2 billion this year. We have 48 offices. We're going to do $2 billion this year between me and my partners. So great. Yes, it's great. And in 2018, the company I was at was just a small company. I was looking to really expand, and I didn't have the funding or the backing there to really expand anymore. So I needed a bigger horse in the game, which is how I ended up at Cardinal Financial. So Cardinal Financial is a national company that was backed by a hedge fund by the name of Fortress. I had a relationship with the guys at Fortress through my own commercial mortgage company, which is Home Qualified. I did a lot of business with them. They said, hey, we just bought into this company. They have really special technology. Would you be interested in coming on to run New York or New Jersey and expand as much as you want? So over the next couple of years, I between me and then I partnered back up with my old guys I worked with. They were running a division doing about the same amount of business at another company. So we came back together, and we've grown it from about 800 million to just about a little bit over 2 billion this year in mortgages.
That's amazing. When you came together, was it an easy conversation to make the decision to collaborate and do this together, or did you have to overcome some obstacles, let's say, along the way?
It's never so. Both. We had been trying to get back together for a while. We just couldn't. I couldn't bring my group to his company, and he couldn't bring his group to my company because there wasn't enough resources for both of us. So we would have just bastardized each other's businesses if we did that. We knew that. So we were really looking for an opportunity to come together. And at the time, I had been offered a backing by a couple of different people to start my own mortgage bank. And to be totally honest with you, I just didn't have the interest in it because I really wanted to play on a grander scale. And I didn't want to be stuck in compliance meetings and with lawyers all day running a mortgage bank. I wanted to be able to get out there and do what I do best, which is branding and building business. And I really felt like that was a better opportunity for me to earn where I could earn the most and do the best for me. So when I went to Frank and Jim with the proposal, I said, look, I'm talking to this company. This is what's special about them. I've been vetting them for 2 years. They had known somebody else that was on the board of the company. They said, yeah, they've been talking to us about it. I said, well, let's meet with them. So, over the next 4 or 5 months, we moved like 150 people, which was the hard part to this new company. And subsequently, the company I was at is now no longer in business. And, I think on the way out, they realized I was doing about 50% of the company's business at that point. So I think they realized that, and it wasn't something I didn't rip the Band-Aid off. They had known that I was thinking about going someplace else for a long while because I just didn't feel like I was growing anymore. And so when I went to them to finally kind of talk to them about leaving, I think there was 3 owners of that company. And I think that with one of the owners, his ego got in the way a little bit. And he's a good guy, and I learned a lot from him. But I think his ego got in the way a little bit. Like, hey, I know I can do this without you. I did it before. I did it again. But they hadn't realized, I think, at the time was that they had taken their foot off the gas pedal. They weren't really involved. So they weren't involved day to day anymore. So they weren't. So I think when they got forced to be back day to day, it just didn't work the same way anymore. So it just was the right thing at the right time in my career. And, getting back with my other partner was just, everything kind of worked. And we've really, it's become everything we thought it could be, which is amazing.
I love that. And it's incredible the way that you had mentioned early on that, this isn't this isn't a straight line, right? There's a lot of zigs and zags along the way. There's a couple forward steps. There are some backward steps. I mean, you have clearly demonstrated that it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of persistence, right? It takes a lot of energy and just doing whatever it takes. But you also mentioned something that I think is incredibly important for us to highlight, and that's being self-aware, right? As I'm listening to your story and listening to all the different nuances to it, that self-awareness piece is so critically important because we don't know what we don't know. And like today with the business that you and your partners have built, when you're able to help someone identify where like maybe their blind spots are or areas where they can improve, right? Because maybe they don't see that themselves, but when you've got somebody else, a team around you who's cheering you on, wants to see you successful and will do whatever it takes, providing that kind of feedback, sharing that knowledge, it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, I mean, 1,000%. I think, when I thought I was an expert every single time I failed, and they were my biggest failures, right? So if I come into every single day thinking like a beginner, and when I think like a beginner, I'm very, very self-aware. Like I'm completely self-aware thinking like a beginner. Like I don't know everything. I can learn. How can I be better at this? I want to do this at a high level. I think if I keep myself in that mindset, I really, really make such an effort to keep myself in that mindset all the time. And it also, it gives me a carrot all the time because if I'm a beginner, I can always get to another level. And I think if I'm an expert, I'm already at the top. So I never want to be an expert ever again in my life. I just really, in the intro, and I've heard a real estate expert, and I know a lot about the business, but I'm still very much a beginner. And, even over the last 2 years, like I found a different style of real estate investing that I wasn't doing before. And, and that's because I wasn't so stuck in my ways of flipping properties or owning long-term rentals to not see the writing on the wall that there was a better method. And I started getting into these short-term rentals, which is Airbnb and VRBO. And I started buying a lot of properties around that over the last 2 years. And if I wouldn't have been thinking like a beginner, I would have never saw the writing on the wall with that I can make a lot more money doing it that way.
Yeah, that is powerful. And I love the way that you articulated that. I mean, having a beginner's mindset, that can be difficult, yes, right? Because our ego gets in the way, which you brought up earlier. And I certainly have dealt with that and continue to deal with that. But just realizing that there's always opportunity to learn, there's always opportunity to grow. And, it goes to that saying, if you're the smartest person in the room, it's time to leave the room. Yeah. Right. We need to be surrounded by others who can challenge us, who can push us harder, who can drive us to become better versions of who we are right now and help us reach our full potential. And it sounds like you're doing that every day and that you've learned a tremendous amount. You've brought this up a couple of times, and it is the growth trap. So why don't you share with our listeners a bit about what the growth trap is and tell us about what you've got exciting that's happening in 2022.
Yeah, so the growth trap is essentially when we're born until the ages of really probably 21 for a lot of us, is that we get bigger, we get stronger, we get smarter, we get, everything happens naturally, right? Organically, it just happens, right? I can lift more weight, I can run faster, I'm smarter, I can understand things better. As children, there's no obstacles because we're fearless, we're trying to learn everything. So we kind of just it happens, right? We get to a point in life where we have to force growth because it stops happening automatically. And some people can't do it. And those are the people who are talking about, well, high school is great and college was great. And the beginning of my career was great. When I was young, I was this. And it's because they got stuck. They stopped forcing themselves to grow. And I've been stuck a million times in my life where I got stuck like by this trap where I wasn't growing anymore. And it happened recently. And I got to keep figure out a way to force the growth. And the Growth Trap is a book that I wrote that's going to be back out the first quarter of this year about just that. What the Growth Trap is and how to avoid it and how I've been stuck, my story of how I've been stuck in it over and over and over again throughout my life. And I had to figure ways out of it. And, the idea of the book is to really tell my story, but more importantly, to show people that you never stop growing unless you let yourself stop growing, right? If you continue to force growth, you will always grow. And that's really essentially what the book's about.
Well, can't wait for that one. We'll make sure that we get on the list. And also when it does come out, then you have a link that's available for us to go and purchase that book. Please do share it with us, and we'll make sure that we share that with our community and our audience as well. So
Absolutely.
can you share maybe one or two tools from the book, just something to kind of whet our appetite a little?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, it goes back to, and I just said one of the things, I think thinking like a beginner is a big portion of it, but, I think the biggest limitations we put on ourselves, we always put on ourselves, right? Other people's idea of what our limitations are just their perceptions of us and or their own perceptions of themselves, right? And I think I've gone through that through my life too. Well, you can't do that because of this, and you can't do that because of that, because that's their perception of what reality is. And truly the only limitations we're ever putting on ourselves is us, right? Like I went through things in my life now at this point that I never thought I would get through. Like if you would have told me before it happened, I would say, I don't know what would happen with that. But now my mindset is, and I had somebody tell me this today, actually, I don't make any excuses for anything. When I fail, when stuff happens to me, I just kind of go through my process, right? Like what's my process, the next thing? I think part of what we talked about is that process to get through the growth track, right? This is my failure. I identified my failure. I broke it down into these few steps. Now, how do I improve on those few steps to get to another level? And ultimately, what's my goal? And the other thing with that is that sometimes we fail because we're going in the wrong direction. And the failure is what stops us. It shows us, hey, wait, this is not the right way. So then how do we pivot to go the right way? And that happens all the time too. Like I've been going 1,000,000 miles an hour the wrong way sometimes, and something stops me, right? Like failure stops me. And it's like, okay, well, I know how to do it a little better. Wait a second, maybe you need to change direction. So those are the things I go through in the book about how to really get ourselves to different income levels, get ourselves to different physical and mental levels by first not accepting any limitations, because we are limitless. I really believe we are limitless as people, right? And then giving you the tools to kind of to access that within yourself. And I've learned that through a lot of trial and error.
Wonderful. Well, again, I can't wait for that book to come out, and thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. The other thing, and I know you've got several exciting things that are happening in 2022. You have, and I made a note to myself that you launched a mentoring program for inner city young adults. Man, please share with us a snapshot of what that mentoring program is about and what is the impact that that's making.
Yeah. So last year, well, it was almost 2 years now during the pandemic, but it was about 1.5 years ago I came up with this. I live very close to New York City, and I was watching rioting and protesting and looting, and it was like tearing me apart every single day. And I really didn't know how to help. And and a couple of days I got up and I took a broom and I went into the city and I helped people clean up, and I was expecting it to make me feel better, and it didn't. I was like, what did I really accomplish there, right? So then I started thinking about it. I was like, well, protesting is not the best. I don't think it's the best use of my time, right? I think a lot of stuff that's going on in the world is terrible, but I don't think protesting is the best use of my time for me or for anybody else. I was like, so what is the best use of me? And I thought the best use of me was giving other people who didn't have the access that I had to help them get better in their lives. So we came up with a scholarship fund to help people get licenses, either a licensed mortgage originator or a licensed real estate agent. And it started off as a 3-month internship. And I paid them a salary for 3 months with full benefits and everything like that to give them the ABCs of this business. And at the end of those 3 months, if they accomplished everything they had to accomplish through the steps, they would then be offered a job. So that's really how it started. And we had 4 people in the first class. They all graduated, they all to jobs. 1, 2, 3 of them are licensed at this point, and mortgages. They ended up tending to mortgages, but and even through that though, as good as that sounds, there was a lot of failures in that first class, and there's a lot of programs that I had to change, and there was a lot of rewiring for myself because I didn't know what I was doing. Now we have 4 more people in it that are going through it right now, and in December 1st, we're starting a full-blown a new mortgage training program that's just an extension of what we've done before, but it's continuing. And my goal eventually is to have an academy, and I want to create more leaders. Like, what the goal, my real goal with it is to create more leaders. I don't want, we're a society that is so social media conscious, right? And social media is about followers and seeing what everybody else is doing and all that stuff. But I really want more voices in the room. I want more leaders. So, Jay, you're somebody, when I look at your history, as you started in Virginia and you went to Ohio and you kind of went back to, but you were somebody who had mastered a craft enough where you could consult other people on how to master their craft, right? But you weren't somebody who was talking from a place of no knowledge. Like you had established your knowledge, and then so what I think the problem is today is that we have so many people out there selling systems or selling this or selling that, and they don't have experience in what they're even preaching to people. So the goal of the scholarship program, and then eventually the television show, which is Disrupt This Network, is to highlight people who have actually done the work and that are helping other people do the work. And that's what I'm really trying to do. I want to create leaders that can stand next to me in a room as a peer, not as somebody who's following me around, right? Somebody who brings their own value to the table. Because just like I talked about my job in 2012 and 2013, when I heard my colleague talking about me, what I realized about myself at that point was that I didn't have enough value to be in the room anymore. So I want to bring value. I want to show people how to create value for themselves so they don't have to ask. They can just be the person in the room because people need them there. And that's really the idea of the academy.
I love that. That is so fantastic to create opportunity like that and to give, right, to try to create new leaders, create the ability for those leaders to find their voice and use that voice for good and be able to create a sustainable future for themselves and everyone else around them. The Disruptors Network, how is that going to be distributed? So it's a TV show. Where would we be able to find that? And what is the time frame around it?
Sure. So Disruptors Network this is going to be season 2. Season 1 was, we put out, it premiered last February. It was 8 episodes. It still is. It was on YouTube. It's on Roku. It's on Amazon Prime. It's on Apple TV. So it was on all the streaming services. That was season 1. And season 1 highlighted 8 entrepreneurs who are making differences not only in success, but in their communities and helping other people. And that's how we're highlighting people. Season 2 is going to be on the same streaming platforms as well as DirecTV. So it's actually going to be on DirecTV as well. That was the new distribution we set up for this year. So it's going to be premiering mid-January, and we'll get you the information, but it's going to be on Thursday nights on DirecTV, I believe at 8 o'clock.
Outstanding. Please do get the link over to us so we can share that with everyone. We can't wait to watch that as well. So lots of really good things happening. And I want to make sure that our audience is not only listening to all of the incredible insights that you've shared through your story, but also feeling you on this, right? Because as I listen to your story and as you and I allow this conversation to unfold, what I hear in your story is that you have been able to develop a very strong belief system in yourself. You may not always know, and most of the times we don't know how something is going to turn out, but you take that step, right? So there's a quote, we may not be able to see the entire staircase, right? But we have to take that first step. And that is where we start to experience. That's where momentum happens. That action step overcomes all. And you do that. And I think, I congratulate you on that, but I also look to you as a role model for others to be able to just take action, get out there, do it, become knowledgeable, and surround yourself with great people who can help you grow as well.
Yeah, you hit it on the head, Jay. That's really, really powerful. And I agree. And there's a quote that used to be my boxing gym that I remember now for my whole entire life. That's adversity causes some men to break and others to break records, right? It's by William Ward. And I really take that to heart all the time, right? Like we're all going to face adversity, but how we react to it is really how we're going to be defined. And I'm really looking, every single day, I think this is something children did to me, but it makes me think of my mortality a lot of the time. Like, what am I leaving behind? Like, what are people going to remember about me? And in my brain, if I can impact people positively, the people around me positively every single day and have a positive impact on my family and my wife and my children, then I'm doing my job every single day. So when adversity hits, I'm always thinking of, well, how do I break through this, right? And that's I'm going to keep doing that until I can't do it anymore.
Wonderful. Well, you have definitely cultivated a champion's mindset. So thank you for sharing that. And before I ask my final question, two quick things. Number one, where can we go to connect with you? Share whatever links you can so we can make sure that we are surrounding ourselves with all the good that you're putting out, consume your content, and learn more about all the great things you're doing in this world.
So my website is ralphdibugnara.com, and it's Ralph, DiBugnara.com, and has everything on there. And for me personally, the best place to get me is probably Instagram, and that's at Dibug, DIBUG. And I'm pretty active on there. I put my stories up. I answer all my DMs. So if you guys need anything, you want to ask me any questions, and all my links are up there. So if you need anything, that's where to get me.
All right, wonderful. We'll make sure we share those links in the show notes. And then what challenge would you like to leave our audience with?
It's a good question. I think I challenge everybody to kind of disrupt your narrative, right? So what is your norm every single week? What is your routine every single week? What can you add to your routine every single week that you've been talking about forever that you never do? And I think if you add one thing a week, that's your goal. Just add one thing a week to disrupt who the person you are every single day. Then I think that you're just going to become a better person and improve.
All right. From your lips. I love that. So here's my final question to you. What's one of the greatest gifts that life's given you that you just didn't realize at the time?
I think what life's given me is the want to be better every single day, and not just better at work or fit or whatever, just to be a better person every single day. I think I have to look at myself. And like I said, I think I'm very self-aware, and maybe that's my gift, but just look at myself and where I'm failing. And I still have the desire to be better at things every single day and be a better person every single day. And I think I have a ways to go and I can be a lot better. And I think that's what I'm thankful for.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I want to extend my gratitude to you. Thank you so much for the conversation. Thank you so much for showing up as your best self, for sharing of your insights, your knowledge, your experience, and telling your incredible story, which obviously continues to be written, right? But thank you. We appreciate you being on Business Minds Coffee Chat.
Thank you. I appreciate you for having me. This was great.
It is my pleasure. And for all of you, thank you so very much for watching and listening. And do us a favor, take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. And to enjoy more episodes and to learn how Jay Shear Business Consulting can help build a solid foundation for your service-based business, all you have to do is visit jayshearbusinessconsulting.com. And until next time, keep learning and growing. And we will see you on the next Business Minds Coffee Chat. Take care.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear
Business Consultant.
Jay Shear
Business Consulting.